Hello BookTube, my name is Elizabeth. Welcome or welcome back to my channel, Book as in Books. This video is for Jane Austen July. I read Mansfield part just before Jane Austen July, but I figure it's going to count. And I took notes. Well, I was reading an annotated version. It kind of helps to take notes, but I did take notes. And what I wanted to notice in this particular reading is, what are the characters of Mansfield Park reading? We often see in Jane Austen characters who love to read. For example, in Pride and Prejudice, we have people exclaiming about the wonderful library at Pemberley. In Pride and Prejudice, we had quite a few scenes where people are reading, but we don't know what they are reading, except once when Mr. Collins is reading to the Bennet sisters and he's reading Sermons for Young Ladies by Fordyce, I think. However, in Mansfield Park, there are several literary references, and we're going to go through them together. So in volume 1, chapter 4, we have the breath. Oh, by the way, there will be spoilers. I think not massive spoilers, but there will be spoilers for Mansfield Park because they are reading quite throughout the book. Reading or quoting, that should be mentioned. So first occurrence, first mention of somebody who reads. So volume 1, chapter 4, we have Henry and Mary Crawford who are discussing together, and they are chatting about the possibility of Henry Crawford marrying one of the Miss Bertrams. So Henry says, "I am of a cautious temper and unwilling to risk my happiness in a hurry. Nobody can think more highly of the matrimonial state than myself. I consider the blessing of a wife as most justly described in those discreet lines of the poet, heaven's last best gift." And that is in quotation marks, heaven's last best gift. So while they are chit-chatting like that, Henry Crawford can throw a line of Milton, because that's the poet that is from Paradise Lost. The exact lines are, "My fairest, my espoused, my latest found, heaven's last best gift, my ever new delight." And it is from book 5, lines 18 and 19. And the reason I know that is because it is in the annotated version that I read. And then in volume 1, chapter 6, they are at Southerton. So Maria Bertram, the eldest of the Miss Bertrams, is engaged to a Mr. Rushworth, who is the richest man in the neighborhood, and I believe the richest man in all of Jane Austen. He has 12,000 a year. However, he's a bit of an idiot. And they are discussing possible improvements in his estate mansion, improvements being modernization and cutting down trees. One of the fashionable things to do was to cut down the alley and just, anyway, it's an improvement. So they are talking about that in particular. And Fanny exclaims, "Cut down the avenue! What a pity! Does not it make you think of Cowper? Ye fallen avenues, once more I mourn your fate unmerited." And these lines are from William Cowper's long poem, The Task, from 1785. And I'm quoting the annotation, in which, describing his walk in the Buckinghamshire countryside in an area bordering Northamptonshire, which is where Mansfield Park is situated, the poet mourns the trees that were felled as a consequence of his neighbors' improvements. So again, we have a character who can quote poetry just like that, just to express feelings, goes to poetry. In volume 1, still in chapter 9, so just a bit later, they are visiting Southerton and they are visiting the chapel there. And Fanny Price has not gone out much. She's been to her house in Portsmouth, and to Mansfield Park. And beyond that, she has never really been anywhere. And it's the first time that she sees a chapel. And she's talking to Edmund, and she says, "I am disappointed," said she in a low voice to Edmund. "This is not my idea of a chapel. There's nothing awful here." Awful in the sense of inspiring awe, not in the sense of dreadful. Nothing melancholy, nothing grand. There are no aisles, no arches, no inscriptions, no banners. No banners, cousin, to be blown to be, quote, blown by the night wind of heaven, end of quote. No signs that a, quote, Scottish monarch sleeps below, end quote. So these are two quotes from Walter Scott's The Lay of the Last Minstrel. That is a poem from 1805. I say a poem. A romance of border chivalry in 6 cantos set in the Scottish border in the 16th century. And it says that the lines Fanny remembers, misquoting slightly, are from the opening of the 2nd canto. So Fanny can quote Cowper and she can quote, not quite exactly, Walter Scott in his poetry, should we say. Okay, Volume 1, Chapter 13. That is where the theater thing starts. So Tom Bertram, the eldest of the Bertram's children, is back at Mansfield Park with a friend, Mr. Yates, who was in the process at a different house with a different party of putting on a play, and he was going to act and he was going to be on the stage. However, it was cancelled because someone died. Very unfortunately, they had to cancel everything. And now they are having the idea of doing the same. So the play they were setting up at this other place was Lover's Vow by Elizabeth Inchbald. And that play was based on a German play called Das Kind der Liebe, forgive my German, which translates as The Love Child by August von Kotzebue. So Kotzebue, however that is pronounced. So that's the first mention of a play in Mansfield Park, and that is the play that starts it all. I don't know if you can hear crunching. I have a little dog at my feet who decides to eat his dinner 2 hours later. So in the same chapter, they are discussing the idea of themselves setting on a play, and they are getting very much into it. So there's Henry Crawford, who says that I really believe, said he, I could be fool enough at this moment to undertake any character that ever was written, from Shylock or Richard III down to the singing hero of a farce in a scarlet coat and cocked hat. So Shylock and Richard III are clearly, obviously, characters from Shakespeare. So Shylock is from The Merchant of Venice and Richard III is from Richard III. Also in the same chapter, they are discussing what they want to put on, and Edmund disapproves and Fanny disapproves, but Fanny's opinion is not really sought. So Edmund disapproves, and his brother Tom is trying to convince him that their father wouldn't mind, he would love it for them to put on a play, because when they were children, they learned speeches by heart. So nobody is fonder of the exercise of talent in young people or promotes it more than my father. And for anything of the acting, spouting, reciting kind, I think he has always a decided taste. I am sure he encouraged it in us as boys. How many times have we mourned over the dead body of Julius Caesar, and to be or not to be in this very room for his amusement? And I am sure my name was Norval every evening of my life through one Christmas holidays. So mourning over the body of Julius Caesar, that is again Shakespeare, Julius Caesar, friends, Roman countrymen, lend me your ear. I have not come to praise Caesar, but to bury him. No, I've come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. Anyway, once upon a time, I did learn that speech by heart. I don't remember it now. And the to be or not to be, that is clearly from Hamlet. To be or not to be, that is the question whether 'tis noble in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of trouble, and by opposing end them. And it goes on. And then my name is Norval. That one I didn't know, but it was in italics, so clearly it was a quote from something. And the footnote says that is if a speech the hero delivers in John Holmes' Douglas, A Tragedy, which is a play from 1765, and apparently it was very popular to for children to learn that speech, to teach them elocution and just to cultivate their mind, I guess. So in volume 1, chapter 14, so we are moving one chapter later, they are trying to decide what play to choose. And this time, this is the narrative voice speaking. It says, all the best plays were run over in vain. Neither Hamlet, nor Macbeth, nor Othello, nor Douglas, nor the Gamester presented anything that could satisfy even the tragedians. And the rivals, the School of Scandal, Wheel of Fortune, Hair at Law, and along, etc., were successively dismissed with yet warmer objections. So I'm not sure if I copied this correctly, but anyway. So in the tragedies, Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello, again, a trio of Shakespeare play, very famous. Douglas is the one we've just mentioned. My Name Was Norval. And The Gamester is a play by Edward Moore from 1753. The Rivals and the School of Scandal are comedies by Richard Brinsley Sheridan from 1775 and 1777. The Wheel of Fortune is a comedy by Richard Cumberland from 1791. And The Hare at Law is a comedy by George Coleman the Younger from 1808. So we know that the action of Mansfield Park is at least set in 1808, probably later because of that play. And as I said, it was the narrative voice that said it, but it was describing what the characters had done. So it means the characters knew these plays and decided, no, not this one, not that one, not that one. So again, we have a sense that the characters have a lot of culture. Volume 1, Chapter 16. So we are moving slowly along. Everybody is busy with the play, and then Fanny decides not to participate in it, so she's in her room. And even Edmund, who was against the scheme at the beginning, has decided that he would take part in it to avoid having outsiders come in. And he decides to tell Fanny first before he goes to tell his brother. So if Tom is up, I shall go to him directly and get it over, and when we meet at breakfast, we shall be all in high good humor at the prospect of acting the fool together with such unanimity. You, in the meanwhile, will be taking a trip into China, I suppose. How does Lord Macartney go on? Opening a volume on the table and then taking up some others. And here are Crabbe's Tale and the The Idler, at hand to relieve you, if you tire of your great book. So Fanny is in her room reading. So the travel to China, going to China, that's through the book. And it is likely, I'm going to read the footnote. Well, not the footnote, it's the side note, but the note that comes with it. The book on the table is usually identified as John Barrow's 1807 Some Account of the Public Life and a Selection from the Unpublished Writings of the Earl of Macartney, which incorporated the journal in which Lord Macartney had chronicled the fortunes of the unsuccessful trade embassy that he led to Beijing in 1792. In 1804, Barrow became the second secretary to the First Lord of the Admiralty, and an administrative position that would have made him a consequential figure for Austen's sailor brothers. And we have to keep in mind that Fanny has a brother who is also a sailor, so it would make sense for Fanny Price to be interested by something written by the second secretary to the First Lord of the Admiralty. And then Crabbe's Tales is in all likelihood a book by the poet George Crabbe, so that is pretty much assured. There's a good chance that it's Tales in Verse, which was published in 1812. So if that's the case, it means that the action of Mansfield Park are set later than 1812, well, 1812 or later. But because tale can also mean any type of story, it could also refer to the Parish Register published in 1807. So that's what the footnote says. And The Idler is a collection of essays by Samuel Johnson, published between 1758 and 1760, and that was frequently reprinted. In Volume 1, Chapter 17, so we have a lot of mentions of writers and of books in Volume 1. So Mary Crawford is having a chat with her sister, Mrs. Grant, who is living at the parsonage, and that's the reason why the Henry and Mary Crawford came to live near Mansfield Park, about what will happen when Sir Thomas comes back from Antigua. Because that's the thing, Sir Thomas Bertram is away, so that's why the children are having the run of the place, because there's no authority when he's not there. And Mary says to her sister, Sir Thomas is to achieve many mighty things when he comes home, said Mary after a pause. Do you remember Hawkins Brown's address to tobacco in imitation of Pope? Blessed leave whose aromatic gales dispense to Templars modesty, to parsons sense. I will parody them. Blessed night whose dictatorial look dispense to children affluence, to rush with sense. So she is quoting Isaac Hawkins Brown, A Pipe of Tobacco, which is a form of poetry in imitation of 6 several authors. That's what it says. And the particular part that she quotes is in imitation of Alexander Pope. So again, we have a character who verbalizes their feelings by referencing poetry that they have read and learned by heart. And then there's Sir Thomas comes back, and then there's no mention of books for the entire volume 2. Not one single book mentioned for the entire volume 2. The next book mentioned is in volume 3, chapter 3. Fanny is reading to Lady Bertram, and they are interrupted by Edmund and Henry Crawford. And Fanny closed the book and just decided to go silent. And Lady Bertram said, "We have not been so silent all the time," replied his mother, being Edmund's mother. "Fanny has been reading to me and only put the book down upon hearing you coming." And sure enough, there was a book on the table which had the air of being very recently closed, a volume of Shakespeare. "She often reads to me out of those books, and she was in the middle of a very fine speech of that man's, what's his name, Fanny, when we heard your footsteps." Crawford took the volume. "Let me have the pleasure of finishing that speech to your ladyship," said he. "I shall find it immediately." And by careful giving way to the inclination of the leaves, he did find it, or within a page or two, quite near enough to satisfy Lady Bertram, who assured him, as soon as he mentioned the name of Cardinal Wolsey, that he got the very speech. So they are reading Henry VIII. So in volume 3, chapter 12, we are getting very much near the end. Fanny is in Portsmouth, and she has taken up the task of somewhat educating her sister Susan, her younger sister. And here's what it says about Fanny's influence on her sister. "Susan was growing very fond of her, and though without any of the early delight in books, which had been so strong in Fanny, with a disposition much less inclined to sedentary pursuits, or to information for information's sake, she had so strong a desire of not appearing ignorant, as with a good clear understanding made her most attentive, profitable, thankful pupil. Fanny was her oracle. Fanny's explanations and remarks were most important addition to every essay or every chapter of history. What Fanny told her of former times dwelt more on her mind than the pages of Goldsmith, and she paid her sister the compliment of preferring her style to that of any printed author." So Goldsmith, I'm going to quote the note, says, "Probably Oliver Goldsmith's frequently reprinted and frequently abridged The History of England from the earliest times to the death of George II, which was published in 4 volumes in 1771. And it also says that the Austen family possessed a copy with multiple annotations in Jane Austen's hand." So in all likelihood, that is what Fanny is using to teach her younger sister Susan. And then in volume 3, chapter 14, so the next chapter, Fanny is still in Portsmouth, but she has received tidings of Mansfield Park that things are not well. So Tom is sick, and there's something going on, and she doesn't quite know, and she's wishing that she would be with them. And so this is what it says. It's the narrative voice, but again, it's sort of indirect speech in the sense that we are in the mind of Fanny Price. "Her eagerness, her impatience, her longings to be with them were such as to bring a line or two of Cowper's Tirocinium forever before her. Quote, 'With what intense desire she wants her home,' end of quote, was continually on her tongue as the truest description of a yearning which she could not suppose a schoolboy's bosom to feel more keenly." So Tirocinium, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I assume that's what it is. The subtitle or alternate title is A Review of Schools, and it is a sort of longish poem by Cowper about education, where he condemns boarding schools for boys of the gentry and favors that they be educated at home by their fathers. So Fanny knows that too. So that's it. That's the end of all the books and all the poetry mentioned, quoted in Mansfield Park. And the conclusion is that no one reads novels. They do not read novels, they read poetry and plays. And also we have 3 characters who express their feelings by reference to poetry, and they are Fanny Price, Henry Crawford, and Mary Crawford, which again shows that Edmund is a poor romantic hero. He doesn't have much sensibility. He's just too rational, too Cartesian. It's not that he doesn't read poetry, because apparently he's the one who introduced Fanny Price to everything that she knows. But he doesn't resonate with poetry, or perhaps poetry doesn't resonate with him, that for him it's useful to express feelings. So that's that. So that's it. Thank you everyone if you listen all the way to this point. And I will see you in the next video. Oh, perhaps I could show you my dog. You want to say hello? You want to say hello? So that's my little dog named Parker. And if you ever read on a website that Chihuahuas require just 30 minutes of exercise per day, they are lying. They are lying. So at 4 p.m. today, we went for a walk of 40 minutes in the very warm weather. So I thought he would be very tired. And when we came back, he drank a little bit. He sat down for like 5 minutes. And then he started wanting to get my attention. He wanted to play. So we played fetch for another 10-15 minutes. And then I thought, okay, he's going to be tired. I'm going to have dinner. I'm going to eat. Then he ate. And then I did not eat. And then he wanted to play again. So we played again and threw the ball for a good 10-15 minutes. And then I got to eat a little bit. And then he was again trying to get my attention by rummaging in the trash can, which he had not done up until now in the bathroom. So I just closed the door and we went for a walk, another 30-minute walk in the heat. So we've had what, an hour and a half of exercise in 3 hours. So that's a lot more than 30 minutes a day. So you're going to be calm. You're going to be calm. So hopefully he's going to calm down for the night. And thank you everyone for watching. I will see you in the next video. À la prochaine.